Police say these three men are charged with the murder of Melvin Timmons, an ASU student, at this house near downtown Montgomery last week. Timmons had been stabbed, shot, and beaten. Investigators say the suspects had gone to the house to rob Timmons of money and drugs. Police Major E.D. Alford says investigators believe neighbors who reported the murder robbed the house and victim before they called the police.
And they went to the apartment after the suspects had left, and at that time they began to remove incriminating evidence, drug evidence. They searched the house, moved vital evidence that was useful to the investigation of the homicide. For instance, the knife that we believe was one of the instruments used in the homicide. We determined that they removed this knife, and through the investigation we found that the knife had been disposed of beside Woodley Road near Macedonia.
Several Montgomery police officers are on their way back to Montgomery from Orlando, Florida, where they've arrested another suspect in this case. They and the suspect are expected to arrive in Montgomery later tonight. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The West Jefferson County Correctional Center currently will hold 1,000 inmates. State officials want to increase that number to 1,700 to relieve the backlog of state inmates in county jails. But in federal court today, inmates attorney John Carroll said that would mean a real danger of growing prison violence.
They're trying to solve the county jail problem by overcrowding West Jefferson. I mean, from our standpoint, they shouldn't be doing either. But certainly at this point in time, trying to house inmates at West Jefferson would be a serious mistake.
State Prison Commissioner Fred Smith disagrees. He says violence is less of a problem at West Jefferson than it is at other state prisons.
Well, our position is it's definitely a constitutional environment, and as Governor Wallace has said, the taxpayers of this state have spent nearly $33 million in building that institution, and it's better than most of our high schools all over the state. And our position is we can put the inmates in there.
Another point of contention has to do with work and educational programs for inmates. The state says they'll have plenty of programs to keep the inmates busy. The plaintiffs say they will not. Some of today's testimony about the West Jefferson facility came from former prison commissioner Joe Hopper. He backed up the plaintiff's claim that the prison was never meant to hold more than 1,000 inmates, and he called the idea of putting in 1,700 preposterous. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News at the Federal Courthouse.
Auburn freshman guard Gerald White said it best. He said it seemed like a bad dream, and it was. While Auburn was trying to overcome its first time in the NCAA jitters, Richmond was filling it up from the outside. Johnny Newman was gunning for a 26-point night. He is a great player. And guard Kelvin Johnson was near perfect from 18 to 20 feet, hitting 5 of 6 in the first half. Before Auburn began breathing steadily, they were down 17 at the half, and it got worse. Richmond was playing loose. Everything was falling. The lead jumped to 20 with 14 minutes in the game. Auburn finally came to life in the final 10 minutes. Unable to go inside all night, they suddenly started going over the zone to Barkley. A couple of alley-oops and a Barkley slam dunk, and Auburn was on the move. In a frantic run to the wire, they cut the lead to 4 several times, but Richmond never really buckled. Barkley's layup cut it to 1 with 5 seconds in the game, but with no timeouts, the Tigers had to watch as Richmond just held the ball in the end zone and won the game 72-71.
Did you have any feeling they were tight starting out?
We had to be tight the way we started out, because that's the poorest we've ever shot the ball with shots that open. I mean, Chuck was so wide open, it's unreal, and he couldn't get the shot to go down, and it's just one of those things. We didn't shoot the ball. We shot 41%, but I think that's kind of deceiving because we got some putbacks there late in the first half that basically we wouldn't have got anything down from the outside.
We just took them lightly, and I don't know why. And just because we, from a strong SEC conference, and they, we thinking they're a little school up north, but I don't know.
For them to just fill it up just kind of added to it, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a bad dream out there. I was having a nightmare.
We didn't want to go out on a bad note like this, but we had a lot of things happen to us, good things during the year. Fortunate in the past 4 years, and Paul Daniels and Mark Cahill and myself, we learned to go through a lot of things, and we also learned you got to take the bitter with the sweet. If you can't take the bitter, you don't deserve the sweet.
Were you conscious when it was over that this might have been your last college game?
The thought did enter my mind, but the season has been so enjoyable, I'm down right now, but, if I look back on everything, it's been a great season.
Did what happened last night, would that alter any plans that you might have in any one direction or the other?
No, sir, I'm not going to let that have any effect. I'm just very proud of this team, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to play with it.
I'd also like to take a minute to introduce to you lethal injection is no more humane than the gas chamber, electric chair, firing squads, the guillotine, or the cross. They all take human life, and that in itself is inhumane, and something that the state has no right to do.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and I'm going to step into the back.
Can you decide where you need any assistance down there?
Have in quality. There now. And he looks out to the congregation. He says, "Those of you who might be offended, I apologize." My point here is, me and I really feel very badly about this. People where they ought to be in the realms of religious atmosphere. And we feel that the success of the National Guard is because of state control and the leadership provided by the various states and the adjutant generals. And we need to keep control of that and not the Army to run the National Guard. And as mentioned earlier, for all practical purposes, that issue has been settled and the control of these people will remain under the state.
Load up.
Lindros, number 88, coming back into the picture toward the ball as Lewis drops. He's going to the end zone with it for Joey Jones. Touchdown!
Say thank you for welcoming me here and being with the...
I know he's the kind of guy that can do a lot of things, and if he's on, you know, he can do just about anything he wants. So our defense is going to have a real challenge trying to stop him. And we scrimmaged Memphis earlier in the year, and they pretty much stopped us on offense. So we know that by no means are they going to be a pushover.
Reggie White, the big guy out of Tennessee, is going to be playing on Mike's side, and he's a legitimate player. Would have been a first rounder, no question about it. And he's somebody we got to shut down if we're going to have any success.
These expansion teams are pretty darn good, and Memphis is no exception. They beat the devil out of Chicago badly. They had them 23-0. They lost to Philadelphia 17-9 after having the Stars down 9-3 going into the fourth quarter. So Philadelphia was a darn good football team last year, and they're 2-1 this year. So.
Yeah, I went to those we had a bunch of the guys Bush and Sponak
Minutes to go, has the ball, and a three-point lead.
Well, and Alabama went man for man the last possession, and this time down, Neal got lost.
Bama with one more rebound, and here's a steal, and it appears as though McKinney is hurt. Richardson went in, and it would not go down. There's 6'8", 220-pound forward. Williams for Alabama. So that foul is Alabama comes up with a chance with 2 minutes to go. There's the alley-oop to Bobby Lee Hurt. 18 points for the big center. It's 47-46 Illinois State. Now Alabama on the lead by 1 with... There's the time down low. Brad Duncan ducks inside. Stefanovic from 18 feet. Yes! 7.5. The only best shot. Richardson will have to take it from 15 feet. He didn't get it. Illinois State has won it. 49-48 and keep their hopes alive in the NCAA playoffs. A lot of crucial moments in the last few minutes of the second half. A turnover on a pass on an inbounds play, a missed free throw by Illinois State. But as it turned out, it didn't cost them, because when Lou Stefanovic hit his only basket of the second half, an 18-footer from the right side, it caught nothing but the bottom of the net.
The question being raised is whether or not some voters were illegally assisted during the Super Tuesday primary, and whether the people who helped them vote also told them who to vote for. Willie Fluker is one of the men asking for the investigation.
And we are convinced, based on what we observed and based on what has been captured on television film footage, that it appears that persons were not authorized to do what they were doing in assisting voters. So we're trying to protect the integrity of the voting process.
Alabama law says if a voter is unable to read or so physically disabled that he can't cast his ballot, he may have the assistance of any person he may select. An amendment to the Federal Voting Rights Act also addresses voting assistance. It says any voter who requires assistance by reason of blindness, disability, or illiteracy may be helped. Donald Watkins, a Mondale supporter, is one of the men whose name is being mentioned in connection with questions about voting procedures. He readily admits he helped people vote.
Well, I know personally that I did not improperly influence any voter's choice in the recent primary, although I did render requested voter assistance on numerous occasions.
If any improprieties are found in last week's voting, and remember, so far none have been, U.S. Attorney John Bell says it's not likely much can be done about them. As a practical matter, he says such allegations are very hard to prove, and the only penalty comes at the state level. That is at most a $1,000 fine. And that is perhaps the worst part of an overall problem he sees with our elections process, that voters can subtly and sometimes not so subtly be influenced at the polls, and almost nothing can be done about it. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
What's that, Reed? There we go. How many two?
Montgomeryans turned the clock back today to the 19th century, courtesy of the Landmarks Foundation, who provided the sights and sounds of the Old South.
The North Hall Street District is the city's historic district that's operated by Landmarks Foundation, and we are preserving 19th century buildings for their architectural significance, their historic significance, and for the things that they can teach us about our past, and in learning about our past, we learn about our present.
Since 1967, the city has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in community development grants to restore 20 buildings in the old North Hull Street Historic District. Currently, the Hagler House, which was moved from Lowndes County, is being restored. Buster Smith worked for the Haglers in the 20s and 30s and was on hand today to recreate for visitors the former splendor of the house.
Well, the unique thing is the house is pegged. This whole house is pegged. All the joists and everything is pegged. It wouldn't fall unless the wind comes to take the whole house off.
Future plans of the Landmarks Foundation include the purchase of this lot at the corner of Jefferson and Hull Streets so that another Lowndes County home may be moved here and restored. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
The Kentucky Wildcats clawed their way to a 42-29 halftime lead and were up by as many as 26 in the second half. 5 Kentucky players were in double digits. Kenny Walker had 19, Sam Bowie 16, including 8 in the first 5.5 minutes of the game. And Melvin Turpin finished with 16. Devin Durant, the nation's number 3 scorer, had 26 for Brigham Young, but the Cougars lost 93-68. Maryland shot 70% from the floor in the first half en route to a 55-39 lead over West Virginia. Ben Coleman led the Terps with 19 points. Lynn Baez scored 18, 2 on this awesome slam. Maryland won another blowout, 102-77. In the East, Michael Jordan's Tomahawk Slam sparked the top-ranked Tar Heels to a 32-29 halftime advantage over Temple. The Owls only trailed by 1, though, 48-47 with 11 minutes left, but North Carolina ran off a 12-4 spurt despite the soft touch of Terrence Stansberry. Stansberry scored 26 for Temple. Jordan led Carolina with 27. The Heels won 77-66. Germany's contribution to Indiana basketball, Uwe Blab, scored 12 in the first half as the Hoosiers raced to a 36-34 lead over Richmond. Steve Alford took over the scoring in the second half, finishing with 22. Indiana won the game 75-67, despite 27 points by Kelvin Johnson. In Memphis, side of the Midwest Regional, Akeem the Dream Olajuwon scored 16 points and grabbed 12 rebounds before fouling out. Houston used an 11-2 spurt in the second half to pull away from Louisiana Tech. The Cougars left the Mid-South Coliseum with a 77-69 victory.
The Montgomery police have arrested 4 men in connection with the murder of Melvin Timmons last Thursday night. Officers say Timmons was shot, stabbed, and beaten. Investigators had difficulty solving the case because evidence at the scene appeared to have been tampered with. Police Major E.D. Alford says charges have been brought against individuals believed to have taken items from the crime scene.
A large quantity of marijuana was removed from this house and taken to a friend's house, which we have recovered and charges have been made in that case. It made the crime scene very hard to process because we had so many latent prints that had to be checked against the supposedly people who went there it called us, and it lengthened our investigation considerably. We used some 302 hours of overtime in this case from Wednesday night until Sunday night, and some 22 investigators working the case. And we believe without this interference that the case would have been somewhat easier for us to solve.
3 of the suspects in the Timmons killing have been charged with capital murder. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
And the little boy come out the back and come to the hill there and told us that, hey, y'all house on fire. And so when we got up and looked around, it was coming all down from inside the basement.
I'm going to be meeting with the governor and the governor's staff on that. We've got some sites in Barber County and then the site in Bullock County, and we'll look at all the advantages of both, and we'll make a decision probably sometime next week.
One of the priorities we're giving the task force is prison education. Because of the pressure of expansion of prisons in the state of Alabama, right now the two-year college system is serving 25% of the inmates that are now located in the correctional institutions in the state, and we are developing a comprehensive plan to serve as it relates to basic education, remediation, and the basic skills as well as technical skills that are necessary to do a retraining of the inmates.
The Closer You Get won the 1984 American Music Awards Country Album of the Year. And for Alabama, the four men from Fort Payne couldn't be much closer to home than Montgomery. They sold out all 7,200 seats at the Civic Center the day after tickets went on sale, including one to Governor George Wallace. After working on a special with Hank Williams Jr. aboard the USS Constellation, which will air in late April, the boys from Alabama are back and glad to be here.
I like it a lot better, being able to come back home.
Of course, their fans are happy to have them home.
What do you like about Alabama?
Everything. The way they sing, the way they look, everything. Because they're Alabama.
Alabama will play in Birmingham next Saturday, and their annual June Jam for Charity will be June 9th in Fort Payne with Janie Fricky and Lee Greenwood. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
That is gone.
Standing right here when he was warming up at the second inning. That man down here catching, he had that little pop.
Since 1974, 64,000 Alabama veterans have used the GI Bill to get a home loan. State VA officials say they've only foreclosed on 2,000 of those loans. The hearings were held to gather information from veterans, mortgage bankers, and others interested in saving the program.
And I think that this veterans program is one of the best programs that we do have in our housing legislation, which has been important nationwide for a good many years. So I think that a change of this nature, one, is a retroactive change. We made these loans and did the business based on the concept that VA would serve as the property disposal.
There was also testimony that some local VA employees might lose jobs if the program is changed. VA loan officer Henry Moody.
As far as the VA regional office personnel, certainly we would have people lose their jobs at this office, and we have some already that are looking for other employment just because this is under consideration.
Other real estate lending and mortgage officials urged the committee to retain the way VA foreclosures are handled to save many veterans from higher loan payments and tighter credit controls on first-time home buyers. Congressman Shelby says today's findings could end up as part of new laws prohibiting the Reagan administration from changing the foreclosure program.
But the basic legislation would be a prohibition against OMB through Mr. Stockman just making an administrative decision on trying to change the VA home loan guarantee program. Sometime you've got to have legislation to fight an administrative proposal.
This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Kid finishes college and the dog dies. Life begins now, you know, we all think about it. There's the viewpoint that now, I think one of the mistakes of the Social Security Rescue Bill was the foot in the door relative to the taxing of Social Security benefits. I think those you have already paid taxes on those, and that this ought not to be allowed, and hopefully we can straighten those out as we go along into the future.
Nose tackle Edmund Nelson is one of the newest members of the famed Steel Curtain defense in Pittsburgh. Nelson, who played in all 16 Steeler games last season, was a 7th-round draft pick out of Auburn in 1982. He was a 4-year starter at defensive tackle for the Tigers and a second-team All-SEC selection. At a time when professional sports are clouded with controversy and college dropouts are luring big-money contracts, Edmund Nelson is a real success story.
It wasn't until I was threatened with not playing football anymore that I kind of woke up and said, hey, I'm here for academics, I'm here to get this degree, and on top of it, I'm not paying a dime for it. So, Edmund, wake up and make the best of your situation up here.
Nelson received a degree in personnel management Friday during winter quarter graduation ceremonies at Auburn, a degree he started working on in 1978. He could have played professional football without it, but he chose not to.
You know, it's like I've experienced a new thirst for knowledge in that I've matured a lot since I left. The first year I came back, I made a little bit better grades than I had been making when I was first here, and I was surprised at that.
Nelson is now considering graduate school and a possible law degree. But first, another NFL season beginning with training camp this summer. What will he miss most about his undergraduate experience? He says the college co-eds.
You know, up north, I think they get a little paler and a little bit more skinny, but they're the same all over, I guess.
Have gun, will travel. The life of a Major League Baseball scout. The gun is a radar gun used to record the speed of a prospect's fastball. As for the travel, well, that's just all part of the game they play.
I'm usually seeing a baseball game every day. As far as the miles traveled, I would guess probably 150 to 200,000 miles a year.
After my playing days were through, I wanted to stay in the game, and as a kid, I played quite a bit of ball and went to college and played ball, and I played 12 years of professional ball, and I figure that's what I do best, and I just really enjoy staying in baseball.
You can spot one whenever there's a certain first-round draft choice on the mound, either by the emblem on his shirt, the World Series ring on his finger, by the hat on his head, or by the sticker on his car windshield. Still, somehow they get lost in the crowd.
I really don't concentrate on the people in the stands. I like to just keep the game plan that I have the night before.
Yes, they sit together, and they time at the same time. But do they compare notes?
No, there's a very competitive spirit amongst scouts. We all see the same ball players, but we all make up our own minds about them.
What I got to do is when I go in to see a college or high school players, he might be 18, but I got to envision him at 23 or 24, and if I think he's going to make enough improvement whereas he can help a major league ball club, then I'm very interested.
State Democratic Party Executive Al Lapierre lugged his bulging briefcase into the Capitol this morning and got right down to work with a special party subcommittee. Their job, certify the figures from last Tuesday's primary and turn them over to the Secretary of State. On Tuesday, voters selected 35 delegates, and the State Democratic Executive Committee will select an additional 17 based on the primary vote. This means 52 committed delegates will go to the convention in July. Walter Mondale will have the largest chunk, 26, followed by Gary Hart with 12, Jesse Jackson with 9, and John Glenn with 5. But now that John Glenn has dropped out of the race, party officials say his delegates will be free to endorse another candidate or attend the convention as an uncommitted delegate. The 2nd District, which includes Montgomery, elected 2 Mondale delegates, Della Bryant and John Knight, 1 for Hart, Linda Morgan Blanchard, 1 for Glenn, Annie Laurie Gunter, and 1 for Jackson, Gwendolyn M. Patton. Mondale also picked up the alternate delegate. More than 428,000 voted in the Tuesday Democratic primary, and party officials are pleased.
And it's an increase over 235,000 or 240 we had 4 years ago. I also think this whole thing was a tremendous impact to the state as a whole with money brought in. Some estimates are that 5 or 6 million may have come in throughout the whole Super Tuesday process for the state.
But the ball game isn't over for state Democrats or Republicans. There's still the conventions, another primary election this September, and the November general election. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
No, sir. Come here. No, sir. You can vote it in the machine.
Certainly, I think these are things should have already been looked at. There are 18 suggestions, which I have, and there's nothing magic about that. There could be others, and I welcome anybody's input into this. I don't know how much money we're talking about. The first 3 of them, that is dropping non-state agencies and private schools and eliminating driver's ed, that's $12 million. That's a pretty good start. I think we could go from there to some really significant savings, like if the state were to build its own state office buildings to be paid for by the rentals from the agencies instead of leasing or renting these in the private sector, and so on and on. Some of them may not be practical, I don't know, but all of them need to be looked at as well as other alternatives.
Consumer Week and on the need for quality consumer education.
In that division, regards to this, I've seen that's come from make me a loan, Demetri?
It'll hold about 50.
Regions here in Montgomery, and I'd like to make a special thank you to Robert Pierce, who is our photographer today. We'll be making the pictures. We will ask that the students come up to receive their
Give me this now. Everybody ready? You say money. Money, all right?
Oh, no.
Okay, here we go. Money one. Look right here. Everybody right here, okay? Okay, there we go. And then there arises a question of whether or not, when the probate judge in the various counties decide not to certify the results to Montgomery, whether or not that will create, and obviously it will, some legal problems. So I guess really the bottom line is that a lawsuit in this matter is probably the best course of action, so that a court of competent jurisdiction can finally resolve it. And I don't think the lawsuit that was filed by Sigmund in any way indicates his hostility toward any particular party. It's just a matter of trying to resolve a very testy and complex legal problem. Is going to make the final determination as to what is proper. So I think probably.
we've made a decision to try Mr. Chick Bush again for the capital murder. That trial should last approximately a day and a half or 2 days. The court order instructs us to try Mr. Bush within 180 days, and that means to initiate trial proceedings. The necessary documents and papers will be filed today to do that.
How much money do you think it'll cost to expand once after?
The total cost will be less than $6 million. Right now, we're looking at 5.3.
What are you going to take this to expand? 5.3 for the
No, that's total. That's the total cost.
Commissioner Smith purposely waited to make the announcement today. He had to know how the voters felt, if they liked the idea of a prison in their county. Last Tuesday, the vote total showed the majority of residents favor the project. During his news conference, Commissioner Smith pointed to Bullitt County officials, whom he says were instrumental in selling the idea to fellow residents. The site near Union Springs was chosen for several reasons, most of which are based on economics.
Bullitt County is an area that is really suffering on the economy today, and it's an area that we know definitely that a clean, non-polluting industry such as a prison can certainly help.
And Commissioner Smith says the prison will mean a tremendous savings to taxpayers since most of the project is already paid for.
At Union Springs, the taxpayers had already paid for the site. The taxpayers had already paid for the site preparation, and we have the necessary sewage treatment and water to support the facility. So right off the bat, there's initial cost savings to the people.
Construction is set to begin this spring. When completed by 1985, it'll initially house 400 to 450 inmates, but plans are in the making to expand the prison to accommodate from 800 to 1,000 inmates. The total price tag is estimated at $5.3 million. But when the project means jobs and a $21 million annual boost to the county's ailing economy, that's perhaps a small price to pay. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Everyone's a contender. You know, our division is the toughest in all of baseball, and with Toronto being a little stronger, Detroit strengthening themselves with Evans this year, again, Baltimore and Boston, it's going to be a tough race all the way down.
What feels going to be the main competition in the American League East?
Oh, Baltimore's has to be. Even if they never won anything, they're just a very consistent ball club, and you have to beat them if you're going to beat anybody in this division.
Milwaukee should be back, especially if Fingers can bounce back from the injury. Detroit's improved themselves over the years, and they're about ready to make a big challenge in the East. Our ball club's good. Boston certainly has a good ball club every year. So and Toronto. Last year they surprised a lot of people.
I think you see a whole lot of maybe shooting, running and gunning really, mostly. It's going to be a fun thing, I think, most of all. And all the guys here, I think they're looking forward to it.
Now, you played against some of these guys all year. Now you get a chance to play with them. You think that's going to be any kind of problem?
No, it shouldn't be because all of them good players, and I feel like we ought to be able to work out together, pretty good.
Thought is to, outlaw zones, play man-to-man, and the way we've computed it, Huntsville should win 134 to 133, but I don't know what's going to happen when they really throw it up. But I think it'll be fun, and I think they'll enjoy it.
Bush was sentenced to death for the fatal shooting of a convenience store clerk in 1981. He came within 12 hours of the Alabama electric chair December 29th, when federal Judge Robert Varner granted a stay of execution. The federal ruling late yesterday gave the state a choice: free Bush or set a new trial. District Attorney Jimmy Evans.
We've made a decision to try Mr. Chick Bush again for the capital murder. That trial should last approximately a day and a half or 2 days. The court order instructs us to try Mr. Bush within 180 days, and that means to initiate trial proceedings. The necessary documents and papers will be filed today to do that.
How long will that new trial take, in your opinion?
I don't think it should take any longer than a couple of days.
Bush's murder conviction has been upheld by the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals and the Alabama Supreme Court. Both the state Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court have denied petitions to rehear the case. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The Commission may organize them bureaus. Section 154. The MFJ modified the MFJ to permit the companies to continue providing CPE. The company is now in the process of re-entering and is re-entering the CPE 1 Part 8. And you subtract from that the $18.5 million for the interstate assignment requirement for the CPE portion of this. CPE were frozen as of the end of 1982.
Sumter County borders the Mississippi line in central Alabama, a rural area with a population just a hair under 17,000. More than half the county's population lives in the country. The rest are split between the county seat of Livingston and nearby York. About 2.5 dozen firms provide most of the jobs, primarily in lumber-related firms. For years, the county's Industrial Development Board has struggled to attract industry. Finally, a ray of hope came with the development of the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway. The Tombigbee River runs along the eastern border of Sumter County. Over the last decade, the Industrial Board has been thinking about the future possibilities of river traffic. A study of the Tombigbee was the boost needed. It praised Epps as one of the best sites along the river for a port and industrial site. 15 months ago, the earth movers started shoving the dirt to dig a deep channel surrounded by a 580-acre industrial park with utilities and direct connections to rail and interstate highway transportation.
But there are some gray clouds hanging over the bright hopes of the Port Epps project. But none of the problems, ranging from money shortages to political internal struggles and some misunderstandings, appear very fatal. But they will cost this port some cutbacks, and they have and will cost local and state authorities some headaches.
While the Development Board Chairman William Brewer turned down a televised interview, he says the headache started in December of 1982 when the state Tombigbee Development Authority jumped into the project with more than $7.5 million. Even as the groundbreaking ceremonies were underway, Mr. Brewer says the county authority was wondering where it was going to come up with the $1 million it promised to put in. $1 million that Mr. Brewer says would have made the difference between seeing their dream come true or lose it for the foreseeable future. Now, as the earth movers approach 70% completion, the authority still doesn't have the $1 million. And that, coupled with slight overruns on the work, mean cutbacks, including no barge slips on the river, a shorter channel, no grass, and the main road won't be paved. Items that could cost the state much more to finish later. One thing that ate up most of the Sumter County Development Board's money was the land deal. In a complex series of circumstances involving landowner Drayton Pruitt, former board chairman Dom Newhouser, and the state, the board wound up owing the state nearly $500,000. That's because the state later appraised the land at $1.9 million rather than the $2.4 million paid to Mr. Pruitt. That land deal is headed to court with the board suing James West, the local board's appraiser, who originally set the value of the land at $2.5 million.
One of the biggest headaches for the Sumter County Industrial Development Board is a catch-22 type of situation. All of this land out here is property that's owned by the state, and without owning any of the land, the Industrial Development Board is having a very difficult time going out and drumming up industrial prospects with the lure of low interest and tax-free financing. And without any industrial prospects, the Industrial Development Board doesn't have the collateral or the income to try and buy any of the property.
Even if all of the obstacles named so far were overcome, the county doesn't have any upkeep money or plans, and the state isn't geared up to operate an industrial park. At today's State Development Authority meeting, the new Wallace administration members were tempted to second-guess the usefulness of the whole project, signed into contract just 4 days before the James administration left office. As Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley put it, we may get stuck with a $7 million dock, no customers, and a local development authority that can't afford to manage it. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
They're living legends in the pages of combat history. George Vaughn from World War I, Gunther Rahl, German World War II ace, Pierre Klosterman, the leading French ace from World War II, General Frederick Blessey, a double ace during action in Korea and Vietnam, Robin Olds, World War II ace and a leading combat pilot in Vietnam. The students at the Air Command and Staff College have read about what they've done, but at the best, the history books can only give the students the Reader's Digest version of what it was really like.
To talk to these guys and really understand what it was really like and ask the questions that you aren't able to ask in the textbook arena is something you can't get anywhere else.
But more than learning the details of what aerial combat is like, students learn what these leaders among leaders have to say about the tough command decisions.
For example, today we've learned very clearly that it's not enough to study the books, that you've got to put the time in there, that you've got to fly the missions, for example, to be in the combat before you can go ahead and lead those troops in combat.
And what they have to say about past experiences seems current, because history has a way of repeating itself. Take, for example, Pierre Klosterman. He says with each new development of the airplane, he was told it meant the end of dogfights.
They say, yes, but you see, with the space shuttle, they won't be able to dogfight anymore. Well, I'm not so sure.
Don Phelps, WSFA TV News on the Military Beat.
Allegedly, this was this person's second DUI. That allegedly he was driving with a revoked license, with no insurance, spent 48 hours in jail, paid $50 and got out. And there's just such a sense of injustice in a situation like that it leads one to believe that the laws can be strengthened.
You know, we have freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Really, I feel like that there ought to be freedom of prayer. And really, the First Amendment language was designed to prohibit the establishment of a religion, the establishment of a government-imposed religion. There's no danger of that in America today. The other provisions provide for the free expression of religion. And I think as long as it is voluntary, no one is forced to participate in it, that prayer in public school would be a great asset to a student's education.
3 Montgomery All-Stars will be ending their college career Saturday night. Guard Tony Bell and center C.S. Lundy, both seniors at AUM, have played together since their high school days in Georgia.
This game means a lot to me, you know, because I'm a senior and everything. You know, I'll be able to leave here, you know, knowing, you know, that I contribute a lot to my team. You know,
season over, you know, we turned out had a good season, and I just want to play some more. You know, really, that's what I want to do, and I'm just looking forward to playing the game.
AUM's Larry Chapman, the South coach, is planning on some send-off.
And you know, all these guys have developed good, healthy relationships over the years that they played in the league against others, and you know, I think it's going to be a meaningful experience. It's going to carry them, you know, a lot of years, and as they look back on it, they'll enjoy it and appreciate it.
Alabama Christian's Mike Jones leaves as the Eagles' all-time single-season scoring leader, and the senior guard looks forward to ending his career on a winning note.
All of them good players, you know, and I feel like we ought to be able to work out together, you know, pretty good, and kick the North team.
From Jeff. Mr. President, I remember, and I'm not clear about what our... Mr. Figures, Mr. Foshee, Mr. Goodwin, CF8.
The way we ruled last year and the way that Mr. Lee says has always been ruled.
J. Smith, Ms. Strong. CF10, ladies and gentlemen, I have appointed subject to your confirmation the following to the Alabama Educational Television Commission for a term expiring June 25, 1986. Mr. Bill Meltson. Respected submitted, George C.
We got, I think we got a little bit better circumstances.
That's right.
Mayor Fulmer, on behalf of General Bradshaw, the Army, and the country, I want to thank you for the help that you've given the country to see that flag.
Oh. This, I really appreciate this. Thank you.
We have a mounted army that is characterized by equipment which is high technology, and we just need smart young men and women to serve in our armed forces.
And this kind of support does?
It lets us get those fine young people.
That's an attractive monument. You want to see the sign?
Of the existing industries that we have in Opelika.
If I have something to contribute to life, the first place I have an obligation to is the place that's given me so much, my life itself.
Must have been blowing him down the road.
The governor's task force is a direct response to President Reagan's call for more state involvement in dealing with social problems like poverty. All of this is a reaction to earlier federal plans to cut out waste in government social programs.
I don't know where we'll be able to cut the waste out or not. It's been going on for so long, but they are making an effort. Now let's pray and hope the effort will succeed.
The task force is headed up by General Taylor Hardin, who says the group is not talking about starting any giveaway programs. He says he simply wants to help people who have fallen on hard times.
To me, it makes darn good sense to look at it this way, because we can be very, very outstanding, prosperous, and viable in many ways, but if we do overlook the things that we've discussed here today, if they are overlooked or cared for not at all, then we are not a good state or not a good community, and really if it extended throughout, we would not be a good nation.
One speaker told this group there are government programs to address many of these concerns, but she added, everyone knows they're not working. This group's self-proclaimed goal is to make a real difference in the quality of life for Alabamians. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Sector and church groups and all of us to aid the suffering and help those who need to be helped in this state, because the government cannot do citizen participation, and the Governor's Advisory Committee on Humanity of ourselves and help others. As a governor, I am called on constantly every day by people who are actually without food. It's just that they didn't know where to go. So what I'm trying to say is that the private sector needs to get really more involved, and the churches need to get more involved, especially affluent churches.